It's always so joyful to see young children getting out into the garden. Thanks for sharing that beautiful experience with us. Now we're going to be talking about the fall vegetable garden, another beautiful experience here in Central Texas. And I'm joined by Ally Stresing, and it's great to have you with us. Welcome to this program.
Thank you so much.
Ally is Garden Ally, or Garden Ally, blogspot.com, Travis County Master Gardener, and an enthusiastic vegetable gardener.
I am. I've been vegetable gardening for over 20 years now in the exact same spot. So I've been working at it a while.
Okay, so you have a little garden archaeology going on as well. Always the best kind, though, because you know exactly what the soil holds.
That's right.
That's important. So we're going to be talking about the fall garden, but with the kind of a special twist. There's interesting and unusual kind of gourmet crops. How did you get interested in this?
Well, after you grow cabbage and broccoli and Brussels sprouts and everything over and over and over again, you start thinking about what are some new and interesting things I can try. And so every year I've tried to find something different to grow.
Right.
For example, last year I grew purple cauliflower that was the most brilliant shade of purple. Some of the other things I've grown are the little Thumbelina carrots, which are just super adorable. I mean, they're just really cute.
I don't think I've seen these before.
They're about the size of a golf ball.
Okay.
Very cool.
Okay.
Very cool.
Round like a golf ball.
Yep.
Okay, interesting.
And on my agenda for this year, I'm hoping I can find one in one of the nurseries, is the Romanesco Broccoli.
Okay.
It's a broccoli that looks like a seashell.
Right, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen these occasionally in places like Central Market or Whole Foods.
Right.
Beautiful spiral shape, yeah. Very unusual looking things and tasty. I would assume all these things are tasty.
They are.
Like
Everything is tastier when you grow it yourself.
Of course, of course. So you've mentioned some of the things you've grown in recent years. Let's talk about what's on your radar for this year.
Well, for this year, I'll be starting my Rutabaga like I always do, because I love Rutabaga.
Rutabaga, okay. This is one that a lot of people out there, like they've heard Rutabaga jokes maybe in old movies, but they don't know what a Rutabaga is even.
Right, so purple top Rutabaga is a root vegetable. You're not going to find transplants in any nurseries. You're going to have to start it from seed yourself.
Okay.
But you can start it in the house from seed and then go ahead and put it outside when it gets cooler. And it's just a lovely plant. And of course, the roots are these large,
tuber-like things, right?
Yes, tuber-like. They'll be about the size of a large softball or even larger than that. And they're awesome in stews and mashed, just all sorts of really cool ways to prepare them.
Okay, so like a potato, in other words.
Yes, very similar.
Okay, so Rutabaga is something people can be thinking about. Let's talk at least a couple more varieties. And you mentioned Radicchio a little while ago, and that's something that I didn't know would do well here in Central Texas. Well,
it actually does, and sometimes you can even find transplants of it. But Radicchio, endive, arugula. Yeah. If you like fancy salads.
And who doesn't like arugula?
Right, really fancy salads, grow your own mesclun, baby lettuces, add in some radicchio, endive, all those good things. You can grow all that yourself and be fixed for the most fabulous salads all winter long.
And that, that's so true. And it's one of the great things about gardening in the fall here is all the leaf crops for the that you can grow winter into all the way through into the spring, really.
Absolutely.
And they just keep producing and producing and producing. Okay, so here we are at the beginning of the season. And a lot of plants that, like we're talking about, especially these leaf crops, for example, our summers have gotten so brutal. It's kind of hard to start the fall garden in August now, isn't it?
It is hard to start.
Yeah.
But what I would recommend is you go ahead and start preparing your soil ahead of time. So, and by that I mean go ahead and add your compost and add your fertilizer and actually start watering your bed. Go ahead and set up a shade structure for yourself.
Okay, yeah.
Right, however you want to do it. If you want to buy fancy shade cloth, or if you want to get a couple of lawn chairs and a sheet, that'll work too. But go ahead and start wetting your bed down, because August is going to completely dry the garden out.
Right.
The soil is going to be so hot. In order to get those seeds germinated, you're going to have to get the soils cooled down and moistened.
That's such good advice because, people don't think, well, I don't have plants in there now, why should I water?
Mm-hmm.
But you need to penetrate that ground, and if you just start watering when you put the plants in the ground, they're content to keep the roots shallow, aren't they?
That's true. That's true. So it's really important to get started with watering those beds and getting them wet ahead of time before you put your seeds in.
It's very smart advice, and the use of shading. I think everybody gets that, but it's important to underscore it, especially when you have a transplant that you've moved from either your own home or from a nursery setting, and you're putting it in the ground. Don't expose it to that brutal heat just right away. Some kind of shade cloth, or as you said, even as simple as a sheet can work, right?
That's right.
All right. So that's some good advice. Now let's talk about staging the fall garden. It's something I think is really important in terms of the rollout of when you use the different kinds of crops. What do you usually start with in your fall garden in terms of the crops?
I will start with the transplants. I'll probably go ahead and buy my broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts. And what I've been doing lately is I'll go ahead and buy them from the nurseries, and I kind of watch the weather and I wait. And I'll put them into 1-gallon containers. I'll go ahead and pot them up into a little bit larger size container.
Okay.
And I'll leave them in the shade waiting for the cool temperatures.
Right. Cross your fingers, right?
Right,
Say your prayers.
Waiting for maybe some rain, hopefully. But at least during that time, the root systems are getting bigger.
Exactly.
Exactly. So then I can go ahead and get them into the beds, still shading them. And then another thing that I like to do is I like to buy plants at different intervals. So I don't put all of my broccoli that's the same size into the ground all at the same time.
This is very smart advice, because when you harvest, you don't want to harvest 20 gallons of broccoli, right?
Right.
You'd like to have that fresh broccoli roll out.
Exactly.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. Now, I want to backtrack just for a sec. You mentioned fertilizer. What do everybody understands compost. We know all what compost is, but different kinds of people like to use different fertilizers. And what do you like to use as a fertilizer?
Well, if I fertilized a bed heavily in the spring, then in this fall, I might just go ahead and use a cottonseed meal because the fall vegetables are the heavy nitrogen feeders. They're leafy, they're green, they're going to like their nitrogen.
Right.
But if I maybe haven't fertilized that bed because I've been letting it go fallow, then I might just go with the general purpose 824 type of fertilizer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And then the other thing too is if you wait too long before you get your beds prepared and before you add your fertilizer, those fertilizers like those 824s, they're not going to be available to your plants right away. So what I like to do is after I get my transplants in the ground, I like to go ahead and mix up some fish emulsion and some seaweed.
Yeah.
And I put it in a watering can, and I give them a good drench once a week, all over the leaves, over the soil.
Oh, they love it when they get washed with this stuff, don't they?
Exactly. And then that way the 824 can be working its way through the soil, getting ready for availability to the plant, but the plant's not waiting for nutrition. It's getting it right away.
Again, really smart, sage advice for a way to, and that helps ease that transplant shock too, to give them that kind of rich drink at least once a week. It's something that they really, really enjoy. I have to just, as we conclude here, you make use of all parts of the vegetables, and you have some critters in the garden who appreciate that, right?
I do. I have some chickens, and chickens and gardens go perfect together. Chickens will eat all of your scraps from the garden. So like at the end of the season when I harvest my broccoli, I give the chickens the entire broccoli plant, which by then could be like a huge plant.
Right.
And they will pick that thing clean.
Great way to recycle and keep the hens happy, right?
That's right.
Okay.
And they love, I grow chard and kale and all those things, they just love them.
All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun, and you've given great advice to our viewers out there. Hope they've been paying attention to a lot of your experience here. So thanks so much for coming on board, Ally. It's been a real pleasure visiting with you.
Thanks so much, Tom.
All right, and coming up next is our friend Daphne.